Welcome to the First Thought podcast at Galway International Arts Festival. I am Paul Fahey, Artistic Director of the festival, and in this series you will get a slice of the festival you can listen to anytime, anywhere. Tune in for fascinating First Thought talks, First Thought backstage, final hours and more. You can listen back to all episodes via GIAF.ie or find First Thought on any podcast platform.
It's lovely to see everyone here, and thanks for coming out on such a gorgeous Galway evening. Typical July day here. I'm delighted to welcome you to the second Galway International Arts Festival Vinyl Hours for this year. So this is the start of our big. We've two more to go after this. My name is Tiernan Henry, and I host Vinyl Hours. I've been doing it for a number of years, and essentially what we do here is we have conversations with people who have to sit in this chair or equivalent to this chair and walk us and talk us through the musical soundtrack of their lives. And Tom Waits reckons that songs are just really interesting things to do with the air. And in Vinyl Hours, we think talking about those songs is also an interesting thing to do. We have everyone that does these. What we do is we put up a Spotify playlist, which will be up on the Galway International Arts Festival Spotify page as well. So what we'll do is we'll just play snippets of the tracks tonight, and then we can chat around them. And if you like what you hear, please consider making a donation to Galway International Arts Festival, which is a non-profit organisation that brings arts to the people here in Ireland and around the world. So go to GIAF.ie and click donate. Right now, that's the business bit done. Please welcome Elaine Mai. Elaine is tonight's guest, victim, whichever way you want to look at this. She's a songwriter, she's a musician, and originally from Mayo. And she's regarded as one of Ireland's top electronic music producers. Her debut album, Home, was released in 2021 and was nominated for Choice Music Prize in 2022. She was here in college in Galway, and she played with a couple of bands then. And she's played in the Big Top as well, the Big Blue Top. And for the last decade or so, she's worked with a diverse range of Irish musicians, both producers, musicians and singers, including Dahi, Mackay, La Galaxy, Alvaretti, Law and Sinead White, amongst many others. And in 2020, she was part of the Irish Women in Harmony cover of Dreams, which raised nearly €250,000 for anti-domestic violence charity, Safe Ireland. But for now, and for the next short while, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about her musical choices. So without further ado, please welcome Elaine Mai to Vinyl Hours. So one thing, when I get the music from people, when they send me their list of choices, and again, I always have to do this, I have to apologise for forcing people to take their lifetime of music and boil it down to 6 or 7 tracks. So please accept my apology. And what I love is when people send me their music, it's always interesting even to see what kind of themes, if anything, kind of leaps out. And right away when I looked at yours, I thought, it's a great list. It's a really, really cool list of songs. And what I love about it is it's bookended by 2 really big things. And then there's a whole bunch of really interesting things in between, as we'll talk about. So why don't we jump straight into it and we'll get started. So Elaine's first choice is All My Friends by LCD Sound System.
I was getting into that.
I know. We just let it play. We won't say anything. So this is from their second album. It came out in 2007. So why this one?
There's actually so many reasons, I think, as I was just listening to it there. The main reason is because I think it just reminds me of, going to a house party with your friends, like that kind of feeling after a nightclub when you don't want the party to end and you want to keep going and you're going to go back, and there's this kind of excitement building, like this anticipation, like you don't know what's going to happen. And I think that song captures it so well. And it's so hard to write a song about something like that. And I think the lyrics just totally hit the money, like even from the beginning, set the scene. He's just like, we go back to your house or whatever. And you're just like, I'm there, like I'm in that house, I can feel it. And I think as well, musically, it's just such a perfect song because it takes you on this journey. Like it starts off so slow and then you kind of feel the beat coming in and then it just takes you like on this journey. And I think for me, I have so many memories of just brilliant nights at house parties in Galway mainly, to be honest, listening to that song, because there was always like a point in the night where someone would put that song on, and I love the bit where it's like, you know, if I could see all my friends tonight. And I think there's so many like instances in your life where you're like, Jesus, it'd be class now if like XYZ was here. But then there have been these nights when everyone was there, just like in the same room together. And I think it's really magical and special. I think that song really captures it.
Yeah, and I think one thing I love about it, and the lyric in it, I think is brilliant, because as you pointed out, there's instantly everything you recognise in it. You go, oh yeah, this
exactly.
is about seeing your friends, or this is about what we've been doing for years, but doing it slightly differently, and everyone catching up, and it's very inclusive.
Exactly.
You know?
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm wondering though, like it came out. Would it have been a musical influence on you, on what you're doing?
I don't think directly, because I think, you know, lots of my friends were into LCD Sound System, and I think it took me a while to kind of get on that boat or whatever. I like lots of their music, but I think this song for me is a real kind of one that just stands out in my mind. I think, like, from an electronic music perspective, they kind of stand alone, like, because they're just so good. So, so I'm not sure. Maybe they're just kind of in there somewhere in the back of my brain, you know.
It's a great starting choice, though.
I have to say about it as well that I was listening to it there, and at the, you know, the piano at the very beginning.
Yeah, that it's slightly off.
It's slightly off. But also you mentioned Dahi earlier. Dahi was doing a show with houseplants like in the last couple of years, and Sinead, who I've also worked with, she was playing with houseplants at the time, and they did a cover of that, and she had to play that on the piano. And I remember talking to her about it at the time, and she was just like, my hand, because she literally just go like it was
7 or 8 minutes.
Bananas, like, but she did it, like, so fair play.
And I think I know they've been described as making dance music for grown-ups, and in a way it makes perfect sense as well, because I think it's still about music that's accessible to you beyond sort of an 18 or 19 or 20, you know, like it's, you know, and because you still want to dance, and
exactly,
you end up in a house and you go, don't want the night to end just yet, you know?
Exactly,
you know?
And there's a message to it, and I think it's kind of like emotive dance music, which I really love, like, because I think there's a lot of, you know, just dance music for fun, which is fine, and it has its place, and that's cool or whatever, but I do love when there's a kind of a, you know, like a deeper message or kind of an emotion that you can feel in it as well.
Yeah,
because
there's a real sense of community in it. You know, this is ours and this is us together. You know?
For sure.
Yeah. So let's move from Brooklyn. You're going to love this. From Brooklyn to Ballyvaughan for your second choice of music, and this is a song by Dahi, who you've already mentioned, and it's from his 2016 EP Tribes. So that's Mary Keane's introduction, and that is Mary Keane. And it's Dahi's granny.
Yeah.
It is actually Dahi's granny.
Yeah.
So why'd you pick this one?
Again, for a few reasons. So, firstly, it's just gorgeous. I think, you know, he basically found this recording of his granny talking about how she met her husband. And, you know, I don't know how well you could hear it there, but like she just kind of describes that, you know, when she was growing up, it was very much like, there's this fella and he has a bit of land and he might be a good person to meet, etc. And that's not how it happened for her. She met a guy in Kilfenora and they fell in love and they got married. And so it's just a really lovely story. And I think she's an incredible lady who I had the pleasure of meeting a few years ago. She actually passed away a couple of years ago. But I think, you know, to be able to take something that's so personal and like emotional and blend it into like a modern piece of music, you know, that also is true to you as an artist but respects the kind of culture and the history of this older piece of vocal that you have on it or whatever, is no mean feat, like, and I think he did a really exceptional job with it. And I think that's the first reason. The second reason is that, like, around the same time we've been playing music together, kind of in the same sphere for a long time. And, you know, that track did really well for Dahi, like got a lot of radio play and, you know, kind of was a big deal for him. And from my perspective, I was just like, it felt like it opened up my world a little bit, and then I was like, Jesus, like, you know, if he can do it, like, then maybe I can do it, you know. And like, it's very encouraging, I think, you know, because the whole, like, can't see, can't be thing, I think is so true. But I think even more closely, like when your friends are kind of doing something that you're also doing, and then you see them kind of making these incremental steps, it's very, like, inspiring to you, I think. So that song kind of captures that moment in my life, I think, where I was like, oh, maybe this is actually, like, you know, more possible or whatever.
And I mean, and it really sounds like, just particularly at the moment in Ireland, or certainly in the last decade or so, there just seems to be this really strong community, and it really seems like a community, that people just seem to be, you know, everyone's on everyone's records. and it seems to be so supportive.
Yeah. I think that really, to be honest, that grew exponentially out of COVID, because I think that, we were all so isolated, and there was people who'd been maybe working in silos or with certain groups of people or certain artists for a long time, and I think a lot of people just kind of fell by the wayside, and people made connections, and certainly through the Irish Women in Harmony, thing, Ruth Ann basically just reached out to a load of people and kind of got that whole thing going, and made loads of connections through that. So I think it's something that's become stronger in the last few years, definitely, but it's great.
Yeah. And just on the track itself then, to me, I think it's almost a bit like Gavin Bryars or something, where he, that stuff that he did with the Tramps in London, and mixing it over the music. So it's this lovely piece of documentary recording, and it's not sitting in a traditional setting, it's sitting in this very modern setting, but it works perfectly, and and it's lovely to know that it's his granny on a track that he's, and so it's like skipping the generations, but it's tying them together, and it works so well. And I think what's really nice is that the music is so sympathetic to the voice.
Yes, totally.
That it sort of almost it comes up out of what she's saying.
It does, yeah.
And she's laughing the whole way through it, which is brilliant.
Yeah.
So,
it is amazing.
Yeah.
I don't know if you can hear what she says. There's a bit in the middle where she says, I think we thought we were got under a head of cabbage, which is just okay. It took me a long time to figure that out, and then I was like, all right, I get it now. But it's just gorgeous. It's such a nice thing to be able to kind of have, I think.
Yeah, good. So we're going to go back a wee bit for your next choice, back to 1995, and this was the lead-off single we're going to hear is from Alanis Morissette's Jagged Little Pill. Why this one?
Well, I'm sure I'm not the only woman of this age who, has a strong obsession with Alanis Morissette, but I think that album is it just came out, it captured so many teenagers of that era. I think for me personally, I was playing the guitar around the time, and I just was this is just class. She was so kind of raw, and she didn't sing in this kind of the usual way you heard pop stars singing. And I picked this one in particular from this album because you can hear it there in her voice, she's just kind of practically screaming through parts of it, and I guess she was one of the first artists as a female that I saw being really just herself, and really angry, and just kind of expressing all of that. So to me it was really inspiring at the time, and it kind of encouraged me more to play the guitar and stuff like that. But yeah, there's just there's such raw emotion in it, and I saw her actually in Ivy Gardens, I think maybe whatever she played 2 years ago or something like that, and it was class, because it was just I didn't know if we'd ever get to see her, and then it was just 15-year-old.
And she was so young. She was only about 20 or 21 when she made the album, and so for you, obviously, I think you're right. It's obviously such an important album for so many people, and I think when you look at what was going on musically in the mid-90s, sort of the Britpop thing, which was much more male-dominated, and a particular type of male voice. So this was completely different, and it was American sounding, but not American sounding as well, and the rawness on it in particular, obviously just caught people completely. Yeah,
it's very original, I would say, and definitely in the way that she kind of just the way she sings and vocalizes and stuff like that. But yeah, I think it's class.
So you're playing guitar around then.
Yeah.
And what else were you listening to? Or what was your influence probably at that point up to then?
Honestly, it's probably really embarrassing. I think I loved that album. I was obsessed with that. I was also listening to Eminem at the time. I still know some of the raps word for word. Anyway, we won't get into that. I got into metal for a while, so I think I was kind of just going through my rebellious teen phase. Whatever. I liked Korn and System of a Down and all that kind of stuff. But then I was always mad about pop music. I was listening to Tracy Chapman around the time, whatever, Jay-Z. I think I had just a really weird mishmash. I think my mum was like, "What the hell is going on?"
And was it was the music at home, or was it just?
My mum is a singer and has a really good voice, and would have kind of very much had me growing up around ABBA and the Beatles and all that kind of stuff. But beyond that, I think I used to get a bit of pocket money every couple of weeks, and there was a music shop in Castlebar, and whenever we go over, I'd save my $5 and I go in and I buy whatever single it was at the time. I really feel like I'm making myself sound very old here, but I go in and I get whatever it was, and that would be my thing, So I have lots of really naff things on single, I think.
But I bet you know every single note on them.
Yeah, I do, yeah.
You know?
Like, I would always get obsessed with songs.
Yeah.
Like those, you know that Brimful of Asha?
Yeah.
Like, I had that on cassette, and I used to just play it over and over again. And like, I'd play it in the car, and my mum would just be like, I'm going to hear this when I'm dead. And like, I think I broke the tape at a point. Like, and I'm still the same now. My wife will just be like, oh, whatever, this fucking song. It's a new one. Sorry if I'm not like hers. But yeah, I have a weird kind of obsession with things. I like to get into the, like, every little harmony and like bit of it or whatever.
But I think it's a teenage thing as well. I think it's, you know, there's that point where you're starting to figure out who you are a little bit yourself. And I think certainly, I think music is one thing that we just become sponges. I think that we completely immerse ourselves in certain things. And it is the most important thing in the world until you buy the next one, which becomes the most important thing in the world.
Totally.
You know. So listen, we'll skip forward a wee bit for your next track. And this is up to 2010. And we'll back onto the dance floor if you want. And this is Sun by Caribou. So right on the dance floor with this one. Yeah,
I think to your earlier question, like this music and that album Swim in general will be definitely like an influence. And I think, you know, that's kind of why I picked it in that. Like, you can hear it there in that track. There's this kind of like moving synth, and like, you know, I think it's just so takes you on like a journey. And I think for me and probably like countless other electronic artists, like thinking about that kind of like how you can kind of make dance music more interesting and moving, and like have elements that are kind of like, you know, panning left and right, and like have this kind of, you know, synthesizers that are like doing all kinds of things. And it's certainly like one of the reasons why I kind of got into like synthesizers and stuff like that. So it's just a beautiful album. It's so well put together. And then I think the translation of it to live as well is another super inspiring thing. And like, I think one of my favorite shows, I've seen Caribou a few times, but was at Body and Soul on the main stage. And it was like, you know, it was like him, and then there was a live band, and it was just like, okay, like this is like, you know, electronic music, but it's properly live as a drummer, and like all this live like instrumentation and stuff, and it was just like, fuck, this is like so impressive, you know. And then it's just like the music is just so good, and that track is unreal. And again, like I remember like hearing this track at, I think it was Forbidden Fruit, and it was like, it was all cloudy, and I think it might have been raining, I can't remember, but like people just basically started chanting Sun, and the clouds opened and the sun came out, and I think everyone was just like, what is happening? It was just like unreal. So
a moment,
it was a moment, definitely. I may have dreamed it, I don't know, but
it doesn't matter, it's a good one.
It was a moment anyway.
And I think because I was reading a little bit about this album, and he apparently had 700 tracks for the album. Jesus. You know, like they were all in different shapes and pieces. Some of them were, you know. But what he said as well was, he said one of the things that he wanted to do when he was making this was to get that live feel into it. And he said a lot of the stuff, he discarded it because he was doing DJ sets and playing parts and mixes, and he was going, people aren't reacting, but they're reacting to that. You know, so I think he always had this notion that this is music to be played live.
Yes.
You know, this isn't, he's not just sitting in a studio looking at a mixing desk or a console or whatever, you know.
Yeah, and that's really interesting, because I think it makes you think about how you write differently. Because definitely when I was writing, earlier in my career, especially like electronic music, it was very kind of like, this is a loop, and I started off looping stuff anyway, so I was like, this is a loop, and I'll put that loop and I'll whatever, and then I'll do the next loop. And so it was all very kind of like, you know, nothing much changed apart from you were adding things or taking them away. And then more recently, especially when like I'm writing now using synthesizers, what you're much more likely to do, or what I would try to do now, is like play a line of something, play it for ages, you know, and then like affect it in lots of different ways, and, you know, like build it up, break it down, all this kind of stuff, and then work from that. And then it's such a like golden moment when you like throw in a kick or a snare or whatever, and you're like, oh shit, like that just sounds unreal, and you've got like a natural build up and things like that you just won't get if you're kind of like, okay, I've just built a loop and I'm going to continue to do that or whatever. So it makes it a lot more interesting, I think, and he does that super well.
And when you're working, then do you have a sound in your head that you're trying to get, or as you say, you worked with loops a lot earlier, but now you're using synthesizers, so are you just kind of, you know, not fumbling, but kind of fumbling around, you know, to expand the thing, to figure out what it is you're looking for? and you know it when you know it, or do you kind of have a notion in your head what it is you'd like it to be?
I would say it's both. Like I would often get ideas for tracks, you know, like a little melody or something. I'll record it on my phone and then I'll play that on a synthesizer, and then it can kind of spiral from there. Or I might just go like be writing and kind of just playing and see what happens and kind of work from that. But it depends. I think like, I don't know, like songwriting for me just always feels like I'm almost remembering something, or like there's no question to me about whether something sounds right or wrong. I'm just like, oh, that's not it, that's it, you know. And very often it'll just be like, even on like, I could be writing in an evening and I'd be like, that's class, and then come back to it in the morning and be like, this is such crap, like clearly had like too much wine when I was listening to it or whatever. But it's just like, I very much do it for myself. You know, it's amazing that like I get to play for other people and stuff like that, but if I don't like it, then I'm not interested. Like I like to enjoy it myself, and that kind of guides me, I think. And
you work with loads of different vocalists, so do you think of them as an instrument almost? The sound of their voice as an instrument, or the type of voice they have? Yeah,
I guess so, but I guess I've been very kind of like, I would see them as collaborators, because I think there's such a joy in handing something over and not knowing what's going to come back, because I could be more prescriptive, and maybe I will be at some point, but like so far it's been much more fun to be like, here's this thing, see how it feels to you. This is the general theme, and like kind of see what comes back, because then it can be just like, you're just like beaming because this amazing thing has come back that you would never have thought of, you know.
Yeah, fair play to you. I have to say that. So listen, we'll go on. So when Alanis was, you know, eating up the sales worldwide with Jagged Little Pill and Blur and Oasis were doing whatever they were doing, also in 1995, I think some of these things you forget. It's your next choice. Björk released Post in 1995, which was her second solo album, and we're going to play Hyper Ballad, a little bit of Hyper Ballad from that. Sounds like she's singing in the rain. She must have been recording in Galway.
Yep.
Sorry. So why Björk and Hyper Ballad?
She's just such an inspirational artist, and I think, you know, for me, the way that she continues to like reinvent herself, but also like reinterpret or reimagine her own music is just like really inspiring. And I'm lucky to have seen her 3 times. I saw her at Electric Picnic, and that was the year that she had like the Tesla coil. You know, so she had this, like, built this instrument that was, like, reacting with the, I don't know, energy in the ground or something. I can't even remember the specifics of it. But, like, just, like, what? You know, like, just amazing. Like thinking of, like, what will work, and then building a live show around that. When I saw her in Sydney, I was living in Australia at the time, and she played on the steps of the Opera House, which was just, like, phenomenal. And that was a time when she had, I think it was like an Icelandic choir, I think. And again, it was just like, she's reinterpreting her tracks, you know, and doing them in a different way. And there's a really gorgeous performance of her in London doing yoga, doing Hyper Ballad, and it's basically with like a symphony orchestra, and it's all strings. And again, it's just like, oh my God, like here's another version of like this incredible music that you've made. And it's just like, it's so inspiring. And I think that, you know, she just pushes the boundaries in so many ways. And I mean, a few years ago, she had the whole like app thing where she kind of released an album on an app, and you could like interact with it, and like, it's just like, I mean, she sets the bar too high, really, you know. She's just incredibly impressive. Like, I guess the exact definition of an artist, like, you know, she really kind of seems to see it from a very kind of high level, and is able to kind of like express it in lots of different ways, which I think is really impressive. Yeah, and I think like you were saying about, you know, when she performs, she, like, again, everything is, like, she doesn't have her band. You know, she has whatever is the notion or you know. And I think that's really interesting as well, because there's so few people, I think, that can feel that comfortable with their music, that it will change with them. You know, that I wrote this when I was 20, but it's not how I hear it or think about it when I'm 25 or 30 or whatever, you know. And yet she still can hold on to those things as well, you know. But as you say, like, she's so interesting and so creative about how she approaches music as well. Because I was reading back again, just when she was making this album, when she was recording the vocal for this, they did it in Jamaica, you know, as you would, you know. But she went to the beach, so they extended her mic cord
out from the studio so she could stand and sing to the waves.
Class.
So that's when, and you're like, of course, you know. And I'm sure they went, okay. So,
amazing.
and it works perfectly well, you know. And again, I think sometimes people forget about her. It's how emotional her music is as well. You know, because sometimes like people get distracted maybe by the appearance, but it's extremely personal and extremely emotional stuff that she sings about and writes about.
It is definitely, and I think like it's interesting that you said that album came out in 1995. I didn't even twig that they came out in the same year because like I didn't come to her until I think I was in my late 20s. You know, I just was always kind of like, oh, it's like, you know, that one song that was really popular, and I never really kind of got into her. But then one of my friends was like, she's incredible, and so we would like, you know, sit up late watching videos of her live performances and stuff. But it's just such kind of like, there's so much to kind of like take from it, you know. And I think when you listen, and even like if you watch her videos and stuff, like there's so much going on that it's like, okay, like I didn't realize that, and now I'm taking a new thing from it, and I kind of think it continues to evolve and stuff. So
yeah, she's amazing. Yep. You know. So we're going to go from Nassau or wherever, you know, from Iceland to Cork, and Young Wonder is released an album in 2015 called Birth, and we'll play a little bit of that, of a track from there.
It's just like it's a really gorgeous track, and it came out around a time that, you know, it was very much like going to gigs, playing at shows. I knew Young Wonder, I think I supported them at one point as well. And again, it was just kind of like, this is like a next level, you know. And I think the Irish music scene has just continued to get better like throughout the years. And I think, you know, when Young Wonder came out, it was just like, right, this is like, they're making this stuff in a tiny studio in Cork, and it's just like doing so well, and it's going international, and it sounds amazing. And Ian is like still producing and is so good or whatever. But I think for me, it was just like, again, right, this is like, you know, this can be done, and like, you know, you can kind of strive to be at that level. I guess on a personal note as well, like my wife and I love that track, and we had it played as the entrance music to our wedding. So yeah, so it's just a very kind of like, it holds kind of a special place in my heart, I think. And it's just a great tune.
And I suppose again, like you say, it shows this vibrancy of the music scene in Ireland, that, and it's almost kind of this underground thing in a way. It's above ground, but it's underground, because you're obviously, again, we'll go back to that point, there's so many connections that people have. And I suppose one of the other big things obviously is that it's obviously inspirational. Do you know, and what you're doing is inspirational to other people, and what these guys were doing were inspirational to you. So it goes back to that notion, I suppose, of this very supportive community.
Yeah, it does. And I mean, Ian produced one of my first EPs, and we worked together. And like, I learned so much just from being in the studio with him for like 5 days or whatever it was. It was like probably one of the best things I ever did, because, you know, I could see everything he was doing, and like so many things that he taught me I still do today and stuff like that, you know. He talked about that song when he was doing it, and he just said it was one of those magic songs that came together in like a half an hour. Like he had worked on a session all day or something, and then like he just was fiddling around with that loop at the beginning, and then it all just fell together in like half an hour. Those are the ones that you want, that like you just don't get all the time, you know, but they're magic when they happen.
But I suppose they fall together in half an hour, but they're the result of
all the
hours and hours of, you know, being able to make it fall together in half an hour, I guess, you know, the 10,000 hours or whatever, you know. So, and I suppose that just like when you work then in do you work in the studio, or is it kind of on a laptop essentially, or a laptop setup?
On a laptop, yeah, pretty much. Yeah, I have a little setup at home, but it's kind of minimal, and laptop I can just do it anywhere. Yeah.
And would you like to go into a big studio to do?
Not particularly. I mean, I'd love to have my own home studio, like dedicated, you know, and kind of have that space. And that would definitely be something that I kind of aim for in time to come. But I think in terms of going into a big studio, like not really. Like I can kind of do everything that I need to do myself with a pair of headphones. Like obviously when it comes to like the production, making sure the mix is good, like, you know, take care of all of that. But in terms of writing and doing it myself, I much prefer to like go up to Portnew, which is where my wife's family have like a little holiday home, and just spend a week writing there and kind of do that. It feels a lot more natural or something.
And then the writing, well, I suppose because you can bring your studio with you. Yeah. I mean, the studio's always there. I suppose if you get an idea, you can just pop it into your phone. You know?
Exactly.
And I suppose, are you constantly working on stuff, do you think? Or, you know, are you constantly just chipping away and adding things? And Like, at what point do you kind of think, okay, this is something, you know, this could be an album, or this could be an EP, or...
I'm trying to be a lot more intentional. Like, I would say in the last few years, I've been a lot more intentional. When I did my first album, it was kind of like, it all happened during lockdown. It was like, this is a good time to do this, you know, because I have the time to do it, like, etc. So I did that. I think after that, I've just been kind of like, right, I want to limit what I'm doing, like not take on too much stuff. Because I think for a long time I was like, yes, I'll do this, I'll do that. And then I was kind of like, maybe letting things drop or not able to kind of do them all. So now I'm just trying to be like, okay, I'm working on my new album, I'm working on this one track, which is a collaboration, and maybe one other thing, and that's it, you know? And I'm just like, unless one thing is done or falls off, nothing else can come in, because it's just not possible. I have to try and balance things. So at the moment I'm like working on a new album, and I very much kind of like went into it with that intention and with a very kind of clear idea and theme, and like, if something I'm working on doesn't fit into that, then it's not going to be part of it, and that's it.
Yeah. That's good. And I suppose it's a development, I suppose, for yourself as well. I suppose just as no different than anyone, as you get more experience with something, you know, you feel probably more comfortable with everything. And I suppose does your confidence grow in your own material and your own production? Oh yeah, definitely. And I think it's something that you don't reach an end point. Like, you're always going to be learning, and the landscape's always going to be changing anyway, so you're always kind of trying to kind of keep on top of things. So I think you're always growing in that regard, yeah. Good. Well, your next track is, it goes about a little bit over 20 years ago. It's from the Cinematic Orchestra. And I think they were a British, I don't know if they were ever really a band. They seemed to be a kind of one guy who would have a lot of people coming in and, you know, singing and playing. And they've made a bunch of studio and live albums. And the song that you've picked is called "To Build a Home." And the singer's a Canadian guy called Patrick Watson, so he wasn't in the band, he was just a singer that they brought in. So why this track? I think it's just such a gorgeous piece of music. I think for me, it kind of like, I came to it like later in life, and I think, I don't know, I feel like as you kind of like maybe get a bit older, and as you kind of start to experience like grief and like loss and all of the kind of bigger human things that happen to us all, I feel like you start to realize that, like, you know, life is just like a weird mix of like joy and sadness all at once all the time, you know, and like you kind of like can't ever get away from that. And to me, this song articulates that really well, because there's obviously this real melancholy in it, but there's also this beautiful, like, gorgeous description of like building a home and like everything that comes with that. But then there's kind of like, you know, the leaves falling off the trees and that kind of like decaying or whatever. But like, that's just the circle of life. And I think it just kind of, like I mentioned earlier, I really love kind of emotive dance music. And I think like this is such a gorgeous, like the piano riff and everything is so beautiful. And you'd hear a lot of that in a lot of modern kind of dance music. Like there's this kind of more emotional thing running through it. And I like that duality of like something being happy and sad at the same time, and that you can kind of tap into either. Like, I listen to that song sometimes and I'm like, oh, it's so gorgeous, and it's like you can feel this kind of, you know, home being built, but then other times I listen to it and I'm like, this is so fucking sad. Like, it's just like devastating. Like, it's made me cry so many times. Yeah. But I think that it's just kind of like you can pull either out of it, you know. And I mean, I certainly hear on your album, because there's a couple of tracks in your album that are essentially, they're very, very quiet. And you know, so they're still within that electronic space, but there's a lot of space within them. And do you find it difficult or easy to pull everything back, so just to leave the space there and to let the song or let the piece just sit as something much quieter, or is that? I'd say it's vital to do that, because it's so easy to kind of get lost in a kind of, you know, continually building something up or whatever. But like stripping everything back is just so important, especially in dance music. I think, you know, you really kind of want to give a moment for certain things to breathe. So yeah, it's something that I think I would try and be mindful of. And would you like to try and write lyrics to fit a song, like something as open as that, or as, you know? I did write lyrics back kind of earlier in my career, and I guess it's not that I wouldn't do it again, it's just at the moment I really am enjoying the production side of things, and
I used to sing, and I never really enjoyed it. If I'm being honest about it, I found it pretty stressful. I was like doing like live loop stuff. I kind of stepped back a little bit from that a bit, but it was extremely stressful. It was like you get feedback and it would sound rubbish, and it was just like, and then you couldn't delete it. You're like, fuck. I was just like building up like a layer of shit, like just building up like, oh, awful. So when I kind of took a bit of a step back from that, and I kind of got more into the music, I was like, I enjoy this so much more. Like, because I'm kind of like, I would get really nervous before shows, and it was just kind of horrible, you know. Yeah. It was like I wasn't enjoying it, like the lead up to, and then I'd play the show, and I'd kind of get into the show maybe halfway, and after I'd just be like, oh, thank God that's over. Whereas like now I'm like, I enjoy it a lot more. So I think it's been important for me to kind of take a bit of a step back.
Good. So we're going to get to your last song, and I think probably we just say this possibly could be an alternative Irish national anthem. We could all just sing it. I don't think we even need it there. So why Fisherman's Blues? Why not?
Well, it's a song I know in my bones because I used to play in a cover band in Galway, and we used to play it all the time. So like I know it, like all of it. It's probably in my DNA at this stage. And like when we used to play it, it was myself and a friend of mine, 2 guitars, and we'd do harmonies and stuff like that. So I really love playing this one because number one, it's like super simple. It's only 4 chords, which like most of the best songs are, and then like I had a lot of fun doing the harmonies and stuff like that. So it's just a really fun song to play. It was a solid one. People always liked it, like great. And then more recently, like my wife and I had a little girl. She's like 14 months now, and you know we realised about her quite early on that she loves music, which is just great. Like obviously, I was like, win.
Score.
Yeah, like, I wasn't actually trying that hard because I'm kind of like, we have to see who she is. You know,
let her find herself.
Exactly. Yeah. But she loves music, so I was like, great. So I took the guitar down out of the attic because that is where it is now. It's down now. So, but I took it down and I was like, what songs do I remember from those times? And like, I know this one, so I was playing it, and she loves it. She is obsessed with it. Like we put it on and she's just like, and I play it on the guitar now and she's just like, so I'm like, sweet, that song's forever going to be one of my favourite songs.
And I think, obviously, that's fabulously personal connection to it. But again, I suppose like you're saying, it's, again, you forget this, it's 40 years old, you know, but it still sounds, I know, it still sounds so fresh, and so current. And I think, again, it's probably, as you say, it's in all our DNA at this point. I don't think we can get away from it. And obviously, it's in your daughter's DNA as well. She's well imprinted at this stage, you know. Listen, it was a lovely way to finish this. And Elaine, thanks so much for doing this. I know you're really busy at the moment, so I really appreciate you taking the time to do this. So, ladies and gentlemen, please, Elaine Mai. And we'll have the playlist up on Spotify if you want to hear all of the tracks, which I please encourage you to do. And I encourage you, if you haven't already done so, go and get the album. It's a really, really good album as well. Okay, thanks again.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you for joining us for this episode. For more episodes, visit GIAF.ie or find the First Thought podcast on any podcast platform. First Thought is presented in association with the University of Galway.